really the same objective. They're trying to achieve the same outcomes towards the project, and they're all trying to deliver on the same deliverables, right? But it's they all have different priorities. They all have different things to solve at different particular times. But it all has to come together, right? You're gonna have different pods of teams that are working on a project, but you're gonna have to bring it together when it comes to a sign off or a deliverable, right? And the same comes on the client side, right? So when uh, you talk about companies, uh, it's larger companies that really have different functions, right? So a procurement team is doing its own thing, right? You then have a manufacturing team that is doing its own thing, right? So these functions are so large, is working in such silos. There are different people, they have their own issues internally, right? So it's really how do you navigate through those issues? How do you look at some of the benefits that this engagement and these deliverables will bring to the overall functionality of this process, or to the client's uh, functioning, right? And again, that is something that you need to navigate through, so that you can land your projects and also learn from them, right? So yeah, I think that would be the first bit, I would say. Those are some of the challenges working with different people across procurement, different functions, right? So it's really about understanding what's common and then working towards that. So sustainability is something that picked up a lot of steam, I would say, around the time of COVID, right? When we actually realized the amount of carbon emissions that we're putting into the environment, it's not sustainable, right? That essentially means that we cannot continue doing business the way we're doing it. There is a cost to the carbon that we emit outside. It isn't a financial cost, but the bill will come due eventually in a non-financial way, right? Wherein you may have to shut down your plants, you may have to completely shut down shipping routes because you just read it today as well, right? The Panama Canal essentially is looking at a drought, so the ships can't really go through, right? So this is something which in the sustainability world is called as a physical risk, right? As well. So I'm not getting a bit technical, but this is really how sustainability is translated into a financial cost. So these are unknown elements which businesses didn't have on their books and their balance sheets before. But today, companies and investors are saying if this isn't taken into an account, at some point you're going to see a massive bill for which you won't have money to pay for. Your business isn't going to be able to navigate these complicated uh, environment and social related consequences, right? So it's really carbon emissions is one of that. You then have the whole social aspect of it, which is diversity and inclusion, human rights, etc., right? Safety conditions, and then of course the governance of who's in charge, how are people looking after the company and its functioning, right? So the ESG aspect of it. So that's really sustainability, and of course, it's vast. It goes across again multiple functions because procurement has its own way of looking at sustainability, whereas a bank would look at the sustainability function very differently, right? So when finance is going to talk about sustainability, they're going to talk all about money, right? As procurement's going to talk about sustainability, they're going to talk about I need to know which palm mill is actually cutting down deforestation, right? So it's they're trying to achieve the same thing again as you looked at it, but to very different cuts, right? So that's sustainability. At EY, of course, I worked on the external side. So I help clients largely on the consumer product side with sustainability reporting. So, of course, the data elements of it, how can companies firstly and foremost start to report on a lot of these external requirements that the European Union has, and even the Indian SEBI board has a couple of regulations today that require these companies to report on a lot of ESG metrics, right? So that's all in a lot of my work today with sustainability, right? That I do with clients. I did work a lot of sustainability in India as well. What I would say is India was of course just starting its journey on regulating this area. Uh, that being said, all of the world really is starting to regulate it heavily now. But as we see, the G7 especially had a lot of these concepts earlier on, right? So when they talk about carbon accounting, scope one, scope two, scope three emissions, emissions trading, a lot of this was really in place in a lot of these countries. I would say much earlier on, right? So I would say around 2010 is when these countries really picked up and coined a lot of these terms, started working on it. And then India, of course, started to see a lot of it post the COVID era, right? Now, these countries which are more mature on the developed nation side of it, uh, as you said, right, they've taken it down now to a money level, right? So there is almost a carbon tax that companies are paying based on the carbon emissions that they're generating. They're able to generate revenue if there is carbon offsets that they're able to generate, which is if they're able to avoid carbon emissions altogether, or even carbon capture is something that they're investing in. There is something that they can earn and generate revenue out of, right? So I would say the regulatory aspect is quite evolved and more advanced in this side today. But of course, that is something we're seeing move towards India as well, right? So and towards the other sides of that side, including China as well, right? So this is largely, I would say, the regulatory piece that is different. Again, from the business element, I would say governments on both sides are giving good incentives for decarbonization and, of course, sustainability altogether, right? And technical landscape, I believe, is India isn't too far apart today, right? In 2024, if anything, India has got it faster in a lot of aspects, right? In terms of the transactions that India handles, right? So yeah, I would just say the regulatory aspects are a bit more tighter here, and you're held a bit more accountable when it comes to non-compliance and it comes to other things. But that's of course something that's a larger piece, right? But yeah. So I'd go back to the first piece, right? Go beyond your job description because what I'm doing today does not match the job description that I started at EY, right? It does not absolutely match even one line of it, right? Because I started in internal audit. I worked in that field for 3 years. The amount of learnings that I got there, uh, also I did things in that time which weren't expected of me, right? So, like example, working on a GST engagement, right? Uh, I wasn't a tax professional, but you get extreme learnings, right? Because you're essentially learning the whole indirect tax system, even if it be for a smaller time. It really stamps your learnings, right? That it is something you have dealt with, it's something you have learned. You also then really get to understand technical terms. What does the back end look like of a tax return filing, right? Am I uploading JSONs? Then you learn what is a JSON. Then you get down into. So it's just really go and learn things. Uh, Go beyond what's written on your job description. Look for newer projects. Don't be scared of newer technologies. And of course, I think the generation that's come after us isn't scared of technology anyway, right? So that's pretty good. But yeah, so I would say more one piece of advice on that side is also learn the business aspect of it because the money is important, right? It may be the best technical thing, but if it's not making money sense, the older guys aren't going to go for it, right? So just giving you a bit of that, right? So yeah, go beyond your thing, learn newer things. They may sound boring like tax, but these are real world things. There's lots you can learn from it, and there's lots you can apply from those learnings, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. I think so. You are coming in from a complete commerce economics background, and I see that these days you have been working on code utilization, which is completely the technical aspect. So you went beyond your job description, like you mentioned. You are doing something so different these days that you wouldn't have imagined. I'm sure you wouldn't have imagined getting towards the tech side of things when
Oh,
you were in your college.
never. Exactly. So it was on the job, right? It is when you start to realize that there's a lot of people making dashboards on your projects. And when you realize, okay, that is a skill that you need to learn, right? There is a whole piece of work that is foreign to you because it's a skill set you don't know. So you start that way, and eventually you start to learn multiple languages, right? So you then start to pick up a stack. You can really pick up a Microsoft stack. You can pick up the Python stack, pick up the Mern stack. It's really up to you, right? It's really about knowing one stack, and just goes from there, right? So learn on the job, right? It's free. You don't need to pay for it. And in fact, you get paid for it. So I would say stick to your job, learn on the job, and take it from there, right? So yeah, that's it.